Right, so next up, electric guitars. Right, so what I've got here is the guitars with most of the effects that I used off, okay? So we've got some reverb delays, some parallel compression, smart EQ, some reverbs, pre's, tremolos, we've got the eventide stuff as well. So this is what the guitars would sound like without kind of the smart EQ and a lot of the effects off. And this is with everything on. Right, okay, so you can definitely hear that there is a big difference. There's a difference in width, there's a difference in depth, and there's also just a lot of ear candy going on as well. So I'm going to kind of show you the kind of things that I use that, to me, kind of gives a little bit of interest to the guitars and really allows them to kind of sit back further in the mix, but still have like enough ear candy to take your attention and almost kind of hug the mix. Right, so let's kind of break it down kind of guitar by guitar, kind of, and I'll show you some of the stuff that I used to make things sound a little bit better. So I've got the smart EQ on every track, and what that is doing is essentially taking out a lot of the mud that you can get in guitars. As you can see, like, there's a lot of mid-range getting cut there. I mean, yeah, around the like 250, 300 mark, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the smart EQ, and I'm also going to add in this, which is the eventide. Honestly, this has become like a little bit of a staple on guitars for me. I love what it does in terms of like that kind of harmonized chorusy effect, but honestly, see the stereo width in this, it's unbelievable. Just listen to the depth and the width and the character. It adds a little bit of interest to the guitars. So I'll play it without, and then I'll add in both. Right, so hopefully what you can hear there is that what Smart EQ is doing is Smart EQ is kind of taking out a lot of the boxiness. Many people might listen to this in solo and say, oh, you've taken out a lot of body, but like that's one guitar, and you imagine all the guitars are doing that, and they all have that kind of same amount of kind of low mid body it has in solo. When you combine all the guitars up, it's going to sound really boxy, and it's kind of going to get in the way of the bass, and it's just overall, in my opinion, just clouds up the mix. And Smart EQ does an amazing job of really smoothing out the guitars and really allows them to just sit back in the mix, in my opinion, right? So that is one guitar that's on the left, and then let's play the other guitar. So I'll add this in, and I'll take Smart EQ in and out of both instances so you could really hear what Smart EQ is doing. Right, so hopefully what you can hear there is that Smart EQ is just really taking out a lot of that boxiness and kind of muddiness that would build up, and it did build up in the mix. That's why I like using it so much. It does it for you, and it means that you could start to think kind of more creatively. It's an unbelievable plugin. Now, what I'll do is I'll take out the guitar verb, which is a arturia. I've just been getting so much into the effects collection, and the reverbs and delays are awesome, and you'll see it all over this mix. I use the reverb spring as it's a guitar. I think it sounds awesome, really awesome. And the way that I've got this set up is I'm kind of doing a stereo trick, kind of a mono stereo trick that I kind of learned from Dave Pensado, where again, as you can see, I've got the guitar going left, but the reverb's going right the send, and then I'm doing the exact same and then doing the opposite. And for me, the reverbs just kind of melt together and give this kind of nice kind of element of stereo without being fully stereo. So what I'll do is I'll play the guitars with the verb and without, so you can hear just how impactful the reverb is and how much it is doing in terms of kind of adding more dimension just to these first two guitars. And in the mix, what that does is it just allows these two guitars to melt into the background a little bit more, but still adding a little bit of depth. I'm using the reverb to position these guitars a little bit further back, and this reverb, I think, just sounds awesome, absolutely awesome from Arturia. Now let's move on to another set of guitars that I've got. I've got Smart EQ3, and again I'm using the micro-pitched guitar settings of the Eventide, and I kind of felt that this guitar especially, maybe it was just kind of the way I played it, it was just maybe a little bit too harsh in its like pick attack, and it was a little bit too audible in the mix for me, and I could hear it and it was kind of poking through. So I used spiff and the cut instance of spiff just to kind of bring down those transients a little bit and just kind of soften the guitar a little bit so it kind of sits a little bit better in the mix. So what we'll do is I'll play it without Smart EQ, the Eventide and spiff as well. And for anybody wondering what the track spacer is doing, the track spacer is a snare sidechain. So every time the snare would hit, the guitars would be ducked just so that the guitars weren't getting in the way of the snare. Hear how it adds this width, especially the Eventide. Oh, I just love this setting, this H 910. Honestly, this preset is great. I honestly just kind of muck about with presets. I used it on snare, I think, as well. I definitely used it on snare. That's in the drums video. And did I use it on vocals? I don't know. I just kind of use it when I kind of feel like I need that kind of sort of effect. But to me, again, the guitars were just a little bit too prominent. And with the Eventide, I've just kind of allowed to just like give it a little bit more depth and a little bit more width, and kind of hug the guitars in the mix a little bit more. So I want to sit the guitars a little bit further back in the mix. I think with spiff and Smart EQ, what they're doing is they're softening the transients of the guitar, so it's just not as harsh. And again, what I'll do is I'll play the reverb and the echo in and out. So what I've got is I've got a reverb spring, and if I feel that it's needed, I've got this another Arturia, which is the delay tape, which is the space echo, the Roland space echo. And again, I just play about with kind of presets and play about with the settings, and I use the ping pong delay again just to add a little bit of difference in left and right, and just to kind of add a little bit more kind of width and a little bit more interest, a little bit more ear candy. That's what I like to call it. So what I'll do, and it's quite low in the mix in certain guitars, but what I'll do is I'll play it with and without both so you can hear. So to me, it's just adding this, again, this little bit of extra depth, and it's sitting the guitars a little bit further back, and it's adding this width. So what you'll notice is that I've got the reverb going completely to the left, and I've got the echo going completely to the right. So again, I'm not doing like a full left and right. I'm splitting them so I've got more side signal. Now, the reason that I do this is because the way that mid-side works is that your mid is your sum, and your sides are your difference. So the more difference that you've got in left and right, the more side signal you're going to have, which means that theoretically your mixes should sound wider because you have more information in your side signal. That's the way I like to see it. So that's the reason why I've got this right, I've got this left, and I've got these two left and right. Now, for another bit of ear candy, what I decided to do was I decided to add a bit of tremolo. I love tremolo on guitars. I'm a Fender guy, and I do love like a lot of Fender tremolo stuff. Now, I was playing about with different tremolos, and this I just think sounds awesome. This is from the Palmary collection from Noiseash, and I really love how it really differs left and right, and just adds a lot of movement and just a lot of depth and a little bit of ear candy. So let's hear what the tremolo does as well as the Smart EQ. Now, you would think, and obviously in solo, that could be a little bit distracting, but in the mix, it really just kind of blends into me. Now, what I'll do is, what have I got? I'll take the guitar verb and echo off, because you can hear a lot more of the rolling space echo here, just because I felt I needed it. Now, this is without the echo and the verb. Do you hear how much width and kind of depth it adds by having the tremolo kind of going from left to right, but then also having the ping pong delay as well, alternating left and right as well. So at certain points you'll have like the left hand side having like the tremolo effect, but the right hand side with the ping pong, and vice versa, and it just everything kind of melting and kind of blending together to give you this kind of element of width. And I just, again, just more ear candy. I think the as much as I do like the tremolo, without the delay, it's maybe just a bit maybe too much, where with the delay and the ping pong delay, it just kind of sits it a little bit back and just adds a little bit more width and a little bit more depth. Now what I'll do is I'll play this one guitar in the context of all the guitars, just so you can hear what the tremolo is doing. It's one of those things where when they're all playing together, you don't really notice it, which will surprise you, but with it off compared to on, you'll feel a difference in movement, and you'll just perceive the guitars a little bit different. So this is with the tremolo off. To me, what the tremolo is doing is, obviously you're losing a little bit of volume because, again, you're alternating left and right, but it just allows this guitar to sit further back. It gives a little bit of movement, and I keep on saying the word hug because that's the way I want my guitars. That's what I want my guitars to do. I want my guitars to hug the mix and sit on like the edges of the mix. I want them to sit wider than the drums. I want them to sit wider than everything else and just kind of hug the mix. So for me, it just does a really good job at adding a little bit of ear candy, a little bit more difference in left and right, and just, again, just basically making the guitars a little bit more interesting. Right, so what else have I got? I have got the last thing that I used. As you can see, I use a lot of modulation, choruses and tremolos, and I'm using the harmonizers and stuff. Now, this is a Leslie emulation. I've already done a video with the timP modulation series that he's got. Now, what you're going to hear is, again, what I'm doing is I'm trying to add a little bit more width and just a little bit more interest. I'm trying to kind of, to me, without all these effects on, I just find that the guitars are a little bit too much, and guitars can sound just a little bit too brittle at times. And sometimes if you add a little bit of modulation and just soften the peaks a little bit and just add that little bit more width, then the guitars do genuinely hug the mix for me instead of getting in the way. So this is without the timP Leslie. And as much as that sounds great, again, it's maybe just a little bit on the harsh-ish side. It stands out a little bit much. So let's add a little bit of the spring reverb and a little bit of the tape, and you'll see how everything kind of comes together, and it creates this really big kind of wall of sound kind of effect. And then, what else have I got? I've got this. Now, this may be very subjective. Now, this is the timP Opto 32. Now, I've got it in LA3A setting. A lot of times I like to add like an LA3A. I used to do it with a Waves CLA3A as a parallel compression, because the LA3A has kind of like a low mid bump that I always would hear. It's got a lot of kind of saturation harmonic character as well, and in terms of if you're going to do LA2A or LA3A in the box, timP's the best man for it. Now, obviously, there's going to be a level difference because I am adding something in that's adding a little bit more level. I'm adding in something. As you can see, I've brought it a little quite high in the mix. And again, I'm just doing it in the context of the mix. I'm just bringing the fader up and just bringing that parallel compression in. Now, obviously, I used gain first. Obviously, I just tried to see if I can bring up the guitars a little bit. But you know yourself when you've got a mix and you'll bring something in the mix and just kind of ride the faders a little bit and you'll be like, it's just too loud. It's just too loud. Is there any way that I can maybe get a little bit more body in there, a little bit more character, just kind of a little bit more weight in there without kind of playing with volume? And parallel compression and a LA3A, I think, can do that very, very, very well. Now, what I'll do is I'll let you hear the guitar on its own just so you could hear the sound of it, so you can actually hear what I'm adding in. Now, as you can hear, I'm compressing it quite a bit, and what you'll hopefully hear is that you can hear a little bit more of the body of the guitars, especially in the low mids a little bit. Because obviously, as I said, I am taking a lot of the body out of the guitars via Smart EQ, and I'm trying to add that back in to taste via the LA3A because I just feel it's adding, you could hear it, it's adding the body in those kind of low mids without kind of being, in my opinion, harsh. Now, what I'll do is I'll play the guitars in and out, and then I'll add in the LA3A. Very subtle, but I do think you can hear, obviously there's added level, but I do think what we're getting is a little bit more weight and a little bit, kind of bit more of the low mids, a little bit back without sounding kind of too muddy or anything like that. We're just adding in a little bit of body, just a little bit more kind of low mid weight to the guitars. And to me, that's what it does. And I think it works very, very, very well. And then last, I decided to add in an acoustic guitar, just because I felt that there was just a little bit missing. There was just, to me, just something missing. And sometimes having an acoustic guitar low in the mix could just be that little bit of a trick that you could use just to add just a little bit of body. It's one of those things where you don't hear it until it's taken away. Okay, so in the pre-mixing stage, I added a little bit of tape via the Tone Empire Relight Pro and done a little bit of cleanup with Soothe and stuff like that. And it's genuinely as simple as Smart EQ. Now, for me, originally, it was kind of adding in a little bit to it. I wanted to add in quite a lot of low end, and I didn't want it to add low end, so I just kind of took all this information out and left it flat, then let it do its thing up to here. Now, as you can see, it's giving the acoustic guitar a little bit of body, and then it's just doing kind of little moves, and I'm using the dynamic function as well, as I did on a lot of the electric guitars as well, just to kind of give it a little bit of life. I just think that what the EQ of the Smart EQ does is it just adds a little bit of that warmth, kind of in the low mid region. Now, again, I did say earlier on about being careful about adding in low mids to your guitars, but you know already that a lot of the low mids are taken out of the guitars, so it's quite a good trick to use the acoustic guitars to again just add a little bit more body in there, because again you're getting those that kind of body of the strums without being harsh. So what I'll do is I'll play the guitars in and out just so you can hear what this adds. Now it is it's extremely subtle, but it's one of those things where when you take it out you kind of do hear it, and you'll hear it more because I've not got the rest of the drum kit and other instruments and stuff, but I'll play it in and out just so you can kind of hear the reasons why I decided to put in an acoustic guitar. It's just adding in that little bit of body in there. It's just adding in a little bit more extra weight to the guitars and adding a little bit of foundation to the guitars. You can really hear when you take it out, it's just kind of lacking a little bit of weight. And sometimes what people will do is people will then start EQing their guitars and adding in loads of low mids to kind of bring in that body that they think that they need. But sometimes all you genuinely need is one acoustic guitar. Just have it strumming away, have a little bit of warmth and a little bit of kind of low mid boost in the acoustic guitar, and just use that for adding a little bit more body and a little bit of foundation overall to your electric guitars. And as you can hear, it genuinely does it. It's almost like there's a space missing in the guitars and it just slots in nicely and just kind of fills in the gap, in my opinion. And it's as simple as that. So to finish up, right, to kind of show you like what it does in each stage, I'll play all the guitars and then I'll loop it, and then I'll play all the smart EQ instances, and then I'll play all of the kind of effects instances, right? So we'll have the tremolos and the neburota and the eventide, and then after that I'll then add in the effects, which is then going to be the LA3A, and then we'll add in the verb and echo, and hopefully from there you'll be able to see kind of certain tricks that you can use to kind of add more dimension and more life and just a little bit more interest and ear candy to your guitars so they can kind of hug your mix a little bit more. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one, which will be the rest of the instruments. So we still have pianos, strings, and the vocals, and then the two bus, rear bus technique, and then Gullfoss as well. Obviously, this is only for channel members. This video I've done just so a lot of you guys can have a glimpse into what it's like to be a member and some of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing in the future with my future releases. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll finish up with what I have done with the guitars. Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week.